Microsoft beats on earnings as cloud unit shows strong growth. Microsoft's Azure cloud growth slowed to 31%, barely beating analyst projections. Microsoft earnings fell last quarter amid economic concerns. Software giant's revenue growth slowed to more than a 6-year low as demand for cloud services cooled. And guys, welcome back to the channel. There's a couple interesting things going on in the tech world. I want to go over them with you. And also, too, what the heck's going on with Microsoft? It's interesting because you're getting sort of conflicting headlines. But the basic gist of it is, for many times people get confused on this thing. I just want to mention it to you. Wall Street basically kind of predicts what they think a company is going to do. And then when the company then reports its earnings, it either misses or beats on analyst projections. Now, it doesn't always necessarily mean good or bad, meaning that you could beat on projections, but if projections were already low, it's not like it's great, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes people say, oh, well, they beat on earnings, why is stock doing X? Again, it has to do with were the original projections good or not. Now, when you dig into the actual numbers of Microsoft, they're still making money. I expect them to always make money. I'm not worried about that. The question is, though, is like, how much are they growing? And so according to this, the revenue is going up by, say, 2%. The thing, though, that is concerning is that it is slowing. And in fact, the slowest growth since 2016. And then also saying is their net income fell 12%, right? So your revenue can be growing, but remember also, too, your expenses could be growing. And depends also as well is what you're comparing it to. So, for example, this is a really interesting chart. Kind of shows their different units and sort of their growth rates. And again, this is fascinating because it kind of demonstrates like how big Microsoft is, like really big. So first is Azure, and this was sort of same with Amazon as well, is that these cloud services are probably the fastest growing in sort of the tech industry, right? Because we're all essentially putting stuff on the web, et cetera, and all using cloud computing. So back in 2021, Azure was growing at the, say, growth rate of, say, 50%, something like that. And it has dropped down to now, say, a 30% rate. The other thing, too, I noticed on this as well, which I think was interesting, is Xbox used to do really well in terms of growth. At one point, it was 34% growth, and now we're looking at negative growth rates, right? And again, this is in comparison to year over year. The other thing that stood out as well is Windows OEM. So this is a representation of essentially computer sales, right? Hardware sales, this sort of thing. And you can see negative 39%, so down quite a bit. And you guys can take a look at this chart. You can pause the video and see what you make of it is. Another one that stands out to me as well is sort of Office consumer products is slowing. You're looking at search, news, and advertising is slowing. And so, if I just had to just sort of sum it up, to me, it looks like you have a slowdown in growth, right? They're still growing in some areas, but the slowdown really seems to be consumers, right? Your Xbox, your hardware sales, this sort of thing. Because like if you compare that to, say, for example, it shows Office 365 commercial, they are slowing, but they're still growing. Compared to, say, for example, Office consumer products, you can see that it's slowing even more, right? So this is sort of where the difference is. And it's interesting because you put this together with what Logitech had reported. And I'm sure you guys know Logitech. They make, keyboards, mouse, and in fact, I'm using some. Logitech makes really good stuff, perhaps the best in the industry. They make webcams and stuff as well. And so we all bought up our keyboards and mouse and webcams during the pandemic. And, essentially, you don't need to buy it like every single year. So they're definitely experienced a slowdown. So they're saying a 22% decline in sales. And it's interesting because if you take a look at Logitech, they got a bunch of different categories. So they got your pointing devices, PC webcams, gaming, video collab, mobile speakers, all these kind of things. And the one that really dropped off was essentially the webcam, which isn't surprising. Like, how many webcams do you need? You buy one and you're done. I'm not quite sure what the other stuff is. It just says other smart home, but webcam, and then you have audio, wearables, which it's interesting because I don't even know what Logitech makes that's audio and wearable. And if you guys are into that stuff, please let me know. And it looks like that is their smallest, right? So their big one is essentially their video stuff. Their gaming is slowing as well, right? You guys can see that as well. So I think they make a bunch of headsets and mice and these kind of things. So, but basically all across the board, like all of their stuff is slowing. So I do expect Logitech to continue to make money, but things are slowing. And it's interesting because you put this together with sort of like the whole industry where, I think it was like Dell is affected by this, Apple, these kind of things, like all these things are slowing. And so we're going to get Apple earnings coming up soon, and we're going to see sort of like, is Apple indeed still selling iPhones or not? And, we'll also hear from Tesla, like, are they still selling cars or not? So, like I said, my overall impression of sort of what's going on in the tech industry is that consumer demand is slowing. There's other big news as well, which it was interesting. It was rumored that it was going to happen, and evidently it's happening for sure. Department of Justice is suing Google, basically saying, hey, you're doing, monopoly type of things regarding your online advertising, and your practices are rubbing out the competition, that kind of thing. Now, this is actually big news for Google. They get about 80% of their revenue from advertising, so this matters quite a bit. And then obviously as well is that, if they had more competition, they would take less money. My understanding, I was looking through this stuff, and I can just tell you guys, I do YouTube every day. Google can take anywhere from, say, like a 20 to 30% cut in advertising. They can make quite a bit of money off this stuff. And so the idea, though, is if there were more competition in the marketplace, be it from Amazon or Microsoft, because like I showed before in the previous chart, Microsoft makes money from this kind of stuff as well. And you could certainly make the case that Chat GPT is going to be coming for Google search, as we talked in headlines. Google may not be the only game in town in the future. We'll see. So this is the DOJ. This is their statement. This is interesting. It says from the DOJ, for 15 years, Google has pursued a course of anti-competitive conduct that has allowed it to halt the rise of rival technologies. Pretty mean talk, right? Manipulative auction mechanics insulate itself from competition and forced advertisers and publishers to use its tools. And that's coming from Attorney General Merrick Garland. And then he's also saying, Google has engaged in exclusionary conduct that has severely weakened, if not destroyed, competition in the ad tech industry. So very, very strong words coming from the government against Google. This is moreover, they're saying Google keeps at least 30 cents and sometimes far more of each advertising dollar flowing from advertisers to website publishers through Google's ad tech tools. That's what I was telling you guys about. Google gets a big cut of this stuff. Google's own internal documents concede that Google would earn far less in a competitive market. This is a statement from Google. They're saying, quote, attempts to pick talking about the government here, attempts to pick winners and losers in a highly competitive advertising technology sector. So you're criticizing the government. Oh, you're just trying to pick winners and losers, and you just don't like us. That's sort of the argument they're making. And then they're saying, moreover, this is Google, DOJ is doubling down on a flawed argument that would slow innovation, raise advertising fees, and make it harder for thousands of small businesses to publish and publishers to grow. So the argument that Google's making is that we actually are here to help the small business, and you're hurting industry as a whole if you attack us. Now, normally these kind of situations, the big tech companies, they got the best lawyers, they got the biggest money lawyers, and people who do work for the government, they do that not for the money, because the money is actually in tech. So it's a real thing. And one of the things that will happen as well is since Google has all the big money and all the big money lawyers and stuff like that, they'll try to drag this out as long as possible, and we'll see. So even though this is being announced, I don't expect this one to go quickly, because you're going up against Google. It's interesting too, because you're going to see a lot of these kind of big fights sort of in big tech, because here's an example. There's a investor called Elliott. They are attacking Salesforce in terms of like hostile takeover kind of thing. And one of the things would be, you would try to buy up Salesforce and then force off a sell of Slack. It's interesting because we saw a similar sort of situation like this with Disney. I think that was Peretz was the name. And it was interesting because the basic just was, accusing management of making poor acquisitions, which is similar to essentially what we're doing here. There was a really interesting one as well, also in tech. I said I want to share some crazy news in tech. If you read the headline here, it's crazy. Amazon warns employees not to share confidential information with ChatGPT after seeing cases where its answer closely matches existing material from inside the company. And it's fascinating because I asked you guys before about if anyone is using, like your Copilot or ChatGPT to help with coding these kind of things. And people are saying, oh my God, this stuff is a miracle. It works so quickly, et cetera. And one of the things that's going on is Amazon is warning employees that, like, if you take Amazon code and you put it in ChatGPT, then ChatGPT, has your code, right? And essentially what employees are doing, you're inputting the code to essentially make shortcuts. However, you're also sharing essentially company secrets. So that's an interesting one that the that the company has to come out and like tell everyone, guys, don't use ChatGPT. You're like giving away all our secrets and creating a lot of problems. So this is an interesting one going forward. It's something I hadn't thought about, to be perfectly frank, because I'm not a coder. But now that I sort of read through this, it makes perfect sense, right? And I could see this for any number of things. I'm just saying, like, for example, an accountant says, you know what, I'm gonna take all of our books and I'm gonna put them on ChatGPT and have GPT figure out where the accounting problems are. But ultimately, what you're doing though, you are putting confidential information out there. And so one of the things that I think will probably end up happening is we are still going to be using AI. I don't think AI is going to disappear. Just probably what it'll be is that you'll have these sort of locally installed on your server, not necessarily in the cloud to where everyone can access. However, with that said, whenever you're putting, confidential information, be it code, money, any number of things, the information somewhere. And as we talked about before, the biggest growth in sort of these big tech companies with, like, say, your Microsoft or Amazon is in cloud computing. So this is going to be certainly a problem going forward. And I'll repeat one of my things that I say so much on this channel. I think, in my opinion, if you want to get a job and you want to have a job forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, I think cybersecurity is going to be one of the hottest fields, like, for a long time coming. I don't see like that is ever going to disappear, because you're going to need these kind of things. So cybersecurity is one I would say. And then another one I would say is obviously get into AI, and you want to be people who are programming this stuff and learning how these things work. And if you're young people out there, I'm telling you, those two fields are going to be hot. Other things as well, which is really quite interesting, I would probably make the same case as well, is if you're able to manage workers that are remote. So I think that is going to be a thing, even though, we just talked about, say, like Logitech is slowing in sales and stuff like that, but it's not like we're going to quit doing remote. I know that some companies are saying, hey, come back to the office, but I just don't see it happening. I don't think things are ever going to go back to the way that they were. So anyway, love to hear your thoughts on the whole ChatGPT thing. Also, too, what you think about Microsoft slowing and stuff like that, and what do you think about the Google lawsuit? So thanks again for your time, and this has been your Daily News.